Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. A few years ago, I felt like I was drowning in information. I was reading all these books, watching lectures, taking online courses, and trying to absorb everything I could about a new subject. But instead of feeling smarter, I just felt overwhelmed. It was like I was pouring water into a bucket full of holes. Information was coming in, but nothing was sticking. I'd finish a book, and a week later, I could barely remember the key takeaways. It was incredibly frustrating, and honestly, it made me question if I was even capable of learning effectively anymore. This feeling of information overload is something I think a lot of us can relate to, especially in today's world where we have endless content at our fingertips. The real problem wasn't my ability to learn, it was my method of learning. I was treating learning like a checklist, just consuming one thing after another without ever connecting the dots. It wasn't until I discovered a concept called syntopic reading, popularized by Mortimer Adler, and adapted it into a broader learning framework that everything started to click. It's a method that's not just about consuming information, but about creating genuine understanding. In this video, I want to share the 7 key strategies that form my system for syntopic learning. This isn't just theory. These are the practical, actionable steps I took to go from feeling completely swamped to feeling in control of my learning journey. We're going to break down how to build a mental framework, connect ideas visually, and actively synthesize information so that it actually sticks. By the end of this video, you'll have a toolkit to help you learn any topic more deeply and, most importantly, without feeling overwhelmed. So if that sounds good, let's get into it. So the first and arguably most crucial step is to establish what I call anchor concepts. When you're diving into a new complex field, it's incredibly easy to get lost in the sea of details, jargon, and conflicting opinions. You read one book that says one thing, and another that seems to say the complete opposite. Anchor concepts are the 1 or 2 fundamental core ideas that you decide will be the foundation of your understanding. Think of them as the main pillars that will support the entire structure of knowledge you're about to build. Before you even start consuming content, you take a moment to ask yourself, what are the most essential questions I want to answer? Or the most critical principles that seem to govern this topic? For example, when I was learning about personal finance, my anchor concepts were compounding and asset allocation. Everything new I learned, whether it was about stocks, bonds, or retirement accounts, I would filter through these 2 lenses. How does this new information relate back to the power of compounding? How does it fit into a sensible asset allocation strategy? This simple act of orienting yourself around a few key ideas prevents you from getting sidetracked by every shiny new piece of information. It gives you a mental filing system from the very beginning, ensuring that every new fact has a place to go, rather than just floating around randomly in your brain and causing confusion. Once you have your anchor concepts, the next step is to start visualizing the connections between ideas by creating a knowledge map. This is where we move from abstract concepts to a concrete visual representation of your learning. Our brains are incredibly good at processing visual information, and a knowledge map leverages this strength. You can use a digital tool like Miro or Obsidian, or just a simple large sheet of paper and a pen. Start by placing your anchor concepts at the center. Then, as you read a chapter, watch a lecture, or listen to a podcast, you start adding new ideas as nodes branching off from those central themes. The key here isn't just to list facts, but to draw lines and explicitly label the relationships between them. This process forces you to think actively about how different pieces of information connect. Is this new idea an example of a core concept? Does it contradict something else you've learned? Is it a supporting detail for a larger theme? This act of physically mapping out the landscape of a topic transforms your learning from a passive act of consumption into an active process of construction. It provides a bird's-eye view of the subject, showing you where the clusters of knowledge are, but more importantly, it reveals the gaps in your understanding. You can literally see which areas of your map are sparse and need more attention, giving you a clear guide for what to learn next. A huge mistake I used to make was trying to learn a little bit of everything every single day. I'd read a chapter on programming, then a bit about marketing, then watch a video on history. This is what I call stacking, piling on unrelated topics, which often leads to cognitive whiplash and very little retention. The solution is to chunk your learning. This means dedicating specific blocks of time, like a whole week or a few days, to a single theme or subtopic within your larger area of study. Instead of trying to learn 5 different things in one week, you go deep on just one. This allows your brain to fully immerse itself in a specific context. By chunking your learning, you create the mental space for ideas to marinate and connect with each other. For example, if you're learning about digital marketing, you could dedicate week 1 entirely to SEO, week 2 to email marketing, and week 3 to social media ads. During SEO week, everything you consume is related to that one theme. This focused immersion helps you build momentum and see the nuanced connections within that specific domain much more clearly. It's far more effective than stacking disparate pieces of information on top of each other, which just creates a wobbly tower of knowledge that's likely to collapse. Reading and watching are only half the battle. The real learning happens when you process and synthesize that information in your own words. This is where reflective synthesis notes come in, and for me, this is a non-negotiable part of the process. After each study session, whether it's reading a book or finishing an online module, I take 10 to 15 minutes to journal about it. I don't just summarize what I learned, that's useful, but it's not the main goal. Instead, I ask myself a few key questions. How does this new information connect to my anchor concepts? How does it challenge or support what I already thought I knew? How can I apply this idea to my own life or projects? This simple habit of reflective writing is incredibly powerful because it forces you to translate passive knowledge into active understanding. You're not just parroting the author's ideas, you're having a conversation with them. You're integrating their knowledge into your own mental framework, making it truly yours. I like to use a simple 2-column system in my notebook. On the left, I'll jot down the key ideas from the source material. On the right, I'll write my own thoughts, connections, and questions. This creates a personal dialogue with the content, a process that dramatically deepens retention and helps you generate unique insights that you would have missed otherwise. When you're learning a subject, not all information is created equal. Some concepts are foundational, while others are just interesting details. Trying to treat everything with the same level of importance is, honestly, a fast track to burnout. That's why I use a 3-tier study structure to prioritize my focus. The first tier is the core. These are the absolute, must-know fundamental principles, your anchor concepts, and really the main branches of your knowledge map. This is the 20% of the material that will give you 80% of the understanding, and it's where you should spend the majority of your focused learning time. These are the concepts you need to know inside and out. The second tier is support. This includes case studies, specific examples, and supplementary details that add color and context to the core concepts. You need to understand this material, but you don't need to memorize it with the same intensity as the core. It's the evidence that helps you believe and understand the core principles more deeply. Finally, the third tier is the peripheral. This is the interesting but non-essential stuff. Tangential anecdotes, obscure facts, or highly advanced topics you're not ready for yet. You can skim this material or, just save it for later. By consciously categorizing information into these 3 tiers, you can allocate your mental energy much more effectively and avoid getting bogged down in the weeds. If you're doing all these things, creating maps, taking notes, chunking your topics, it can still feel a bit fragmented day to day. That's why the weekly synthesis session is the glue that holds this whole system together. At the end of every week, I schedule a dedicated 60 to 90-minute block in my calendar for one purpose: to synthesize. This is not a time for new learning. It's a time to zoom out and connect the dots of everything you've taken in over the past several days. I'll pull out my knowledge map, my reflective notes, and any other materials I've gathered during the week. During this session, I look for higher-level patterns. How did the different things I learned this week relate to each other? Did any new themes emerge that I hadn't noticed before? I might update my knowledge map, combining smaller nodes into larger clusters, or even redraw parts of it to better reflect my new understanding. Sometimes I'll write a single 1-page summary of the entire week's learning, forcing myself to articulate the most important takeaways in my own words. This regular, scheduled practice of synthesis is what solidifies your learning and transforms a collection of isolated facts into a coherent, interconnected web of knowledge. It's the weekly maintenance that keeps your mental engine running smoothly. In our culture of constant consumption, the default is always to seek out the next new thing, the next book, the next video, the next course. But often the biggest breakthroughs in understanding don't come from new information, but from revisiting and deepening our understanding of what we already know. This is the principle of recycling old ideas. Instead of immediately jumping to a new topic, I make it a habit to regularly go back to my old notes, summaries, and knowledge maps. This is a form of active recall that massively strengthens memory pathways, but it does something even more important. When you revisit an old idea with the benefit of everything new you've learned since, you see it in a completely different light. You spot connections you missed the first time around. You can add new layers of nuance and context. For example, I might go back to my notes on a foundational economics book after having read 3 more advanced texts on the subject. I'm not just rereading, I'm actively updating my old notes, adding new perspectives, and challenging my original interpretations. This practice of recycling and refining your existing knowledge base is far more valuable than endlessly consuming new, surface-level information. It's how you build true, lasting mastery over a subject. So there you have it. 7 strategies to move beyond simple information consumption and start building a deep, interconnected understanding of any subject you want to learn. From establishing anchor concepts and creating knowledge maps to chunking your studies and holding weekly synthesis sessions, this is the system that helped me conquer that feeling of being overwhelmed. It shifted my focus from the quantity of information I was consuming to the quality of the connections I was making. Learning became less of a chore and more of a creative process of building something that was uniquely my own. The key takeaway from all of this is that effective learning is an active, intentional process. It's not about passively letting information wash over you. It's about engaging with it, questioning it, and weaving it into your existing mental framework. The goal isn't just to know more things, but to understand things on a deeper level. Whether you adopt all 7 of these strategies or just start with 1 or 2, like creating a knowledge map or trying a weekly synthesis session, I promise you'll start to feel more in control and less stressed by the sheer volume of information out there. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, hitting that like button would be amazing, as it really helps the channel out. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's one technique you use to beat information overload? Or which of these strategies are you most excited to try first? Sharing our methods is one of the best ways we can all learn from each other. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.